From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have coming up. Helsinki hustle. Manfred Weber and Alexander Stubb vie for votes, hoping to become the next Commission president. What about Europe? The impact of a weakened Donald Trump following U.S. midterm elections. Legally vegan. As the EU considers new labels, we talk about the politics of the vegan movement. Selling Brexit. A leaked memo reveals the UK government's PR plan if a deal is announced. And whatever you do, don't ask Bill Gates what's in that jar. A very raw moment coming your way. All right, it's time to meet our panel. For tonight, we have Maeve McMahon, our Brussels correspondent with Euronews. Maeve, which of these stories do you like?
Well, it would have to be the US midterms. I'm fascinated by American politics, so that was the one that's keeping me up this week.
Yeah, a lot of people watching that today, especially. We also have James Scripps. He's a reporter with the Telegraph base in Brussels. James.
I'm going to take a bite of the vegan story.
And I wonder why. All right, we'll find that out later on. Also tonight, we have Maria João Rodrigues. She's a Portuguese MEP and vice chair of the Socialists and Democrats group. Maria, which of these stories do you like?
Well, I pick Helsinki Congress because this is taking place now.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where we are going to begin today, because come this time next year, either a former band frontman or an Ironman athlete could be sitting in Jean-Claude Juncker's office. Europe's centre-right politicians arrived in Helsinki for the annual European People's Party conference, where tomorrow they will choose their lead candidate for Commission president. A race between party favourite Manfred Weber, backed by Germany's Angela Merkel and Austria's Sebastian Kurz, and underdog Alexander Stubb, a bit of an outsider, not currently a member of the European Parliament. All right, Maria, you were watching this closely, definitely. What are you watching out for?
Well, first of all, we need to see who will be picked by the European Popular Party to become the leading candidate for the next European elections. And we have these two candidates. But there is a second thing, which is the program proposed by the European Popular Party to European citizens. And I think that this is part of a larger discussion we have in Europe on whether should we go on as it is with Europe, and this is Europe at the status quo, or we want Europe but a different kind of Europe.
And still now it is the biggest party still in Parliament. But
and EPP for me represents the forces of the status quo, those who think that things in Europe are okay and are acceptable. This is not my position. I think we need to have Europe, but a different kind of Europe.
As you were saying, I mean, we want to find out who that candidate will be from the EPP group. Well, let's take a closer look at the two men in the running for the EPP's Spitzenkandidat. First up is Manfred Weber from Bavaria. He's 46 years old. He was first elected to the Bavarian State Parliament in 2002 and then to the European Parliament in 2004. And he's currently leader of the EPP, and he was the frontman of a band called the Peanuts. I bet you didn't know that. We also have former Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb. He is 50. And like Weber, he was also elected to the European Parliament in 2004. He is currently the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, and he has run Ironman triathlons. But the two contenders, they took time out for a friendly tweet at the EPP Congress. In it, 50-year-old Stubb posted #NextGenerationEurope. All right. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, he is actually at the EPP conference in Helsinki, and he is joining us now. Darren, give us the lowdown. What's happening there?
Good afternoon from a very dark and damp Helsinki. However, thousands of delegates have gathered here to decide who the Spitzenkandidat, the lead candidate, will be for the EPP. And my word, Tessa, if there is one way, I suppose, to get to a voter's heart, it's clearly through their stomach. Alex Stubb has set up this rather impromptu hot dog vending stall, and by looking at the queues that have been queuing up here all day, if he gets a vote for everyone he's fed, he'll be doing particularly well. Now, there is likely to be a debate, we reckon, tonight between the two candidates, and then tomorrow the EPP delegates will decide which one they want to be the Spitzenkandidat. Let's bring in these two MEPs, Maria McGuinness, who is with the EPP, and of course Anna Maria Bildt as well. We're going to talk about the Spitzenkandidates process first. Who are you backing?
Well, I'm backing the democratic, open, transparent process that the EPP is driving forward. I think it's great that we're going to have an open debate between the two candidates, and that EPP has produced such an outstanding candidate who both really could make a big impact on the future of Europe.
And I'm chairing the debate between the two candidates live very shortly. So as the moderator, you know you have to be very impartial. So I'm chairing and I'm impartial. But I think what's really significant, and it happened the minute we landed here, these candidates are taking nothing for granted. So there's no sense of, oh, this is just a campaign. It is such a tough campaign for them because it's pan-European. And I think from our party point of view, we're lucky to have two people who are in this race and are in it for real.
What do you think the main issues are? What are delegates, what are you guys talking about over these few days?
For me, it is about values. This family here today, the EPP, is really joining forces to stand up for our core values of democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. And we are very aware of the challenges with populists to deliver concrete results to our citizens, to move the European Union from buildings to the streets of Europe and make everyone feel home.
Yeah, and I think
in Europe.
But Viktor Orban is an issue here, and Hungary, and how to deal with that issue as well.
We have a resolution on the rule of law that will be debated, I expect, between our candidates. We are a huge family, as you can see here, and I mean, everywhere you stand, you meet new people. And I think what's very important for these gatherings is that we work away on our own, and then we come together, and we debate, and there's differences, and very strong differences sometimes, but we can have these debates. And going back to the point you make about values and the future, I think sometimes we are obsessed about a Europe that doesn't work, when in fact there's an awful lot about the European Union that does work. So part of the campaigns that our candidates are running is also about being positive, not about just giving people more and more anxieties. It's actually saying we can deliver for the people of Europe. And I'm really looking forward to chairing this debate. I've no idea how it will go, so I think I've a 40-minute window. And then tomorrow morning, the two candidates again will be making their set pieces.
Just in regards to this, the Spitzenkandidat candidate process, I mean, how concrete, how assured are you that this will work next year? That whoever is decided, that this process will still be in place? Because there are suggestions that the Council will still just decide someone they want.
The focus here is to have an upcoming Commission President that can take responsibility to solve citizens' problems, to manage migration, to provide security and safety within the European Union at our external border, to double our efforts on climate change and sustainability, and to create jobs and growth and make Europe a global competitor that reaps the benefits of digital revolution.
Very quickly.
Look, all of those things are there, and I think that's why we're here as an EPP group, that we see Europe as being a solution to many of the problems, whereas others see Europe as a problem. That's not our style here. We're a very positive and forward-looking party, and we have two brave candidates, and I believe that whoever comes out of this will actually be the next President of the Commission, because the Council have to respect the views of the electorate, who will decide.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see if that does happen. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the time in Helsinki and the debate tonight, which of course we'll have coverage of that tomorrow. And indeed, whoever wins this process, to say we are expecting an announcement, we think around lunchtime tomorrow, and then we'll hear from the winning candidates.
All right, thank you for that, Darren McCaffrey and his guests, Mairead McGuinness and Anna Maria Corazza-Bildt. All right, well, there's going the hot dog way is one way, but I mean, with the support of Angela Merkel already, Manfred Weber, is he a shoo-in?
Well, I mean, but one thing I want to say about Manfred Weber is that outside of Bavaria and Brussels, no one knows who he is. And similarly, Alexander Stubb, outside of Finland, where he was Prime Minister for not quite a year, and Brussels, no one really knows who he is. So this idea that these are some titans bestriding the European stage in a kind of American-style presidential race is just a crock.
But they are talking to their party, I mean.
Well, yeah, exactly. But, you know, they're talking about the European demos, the European electorate. It's not. These are people who are talking to each other in a room in Helsinki. And, you know, look, I understand. You've got to build up, if this is the way you want to go, you have to build up this habit. But the idea that the European people are going to go and vote in the European Parliament elections because they are motivated to select the president of the European Commission is frankly, well, it's what Bill Gates has in his jar.
Which we'll find out later. All right, Maeve, just to bring up Maria's point earlier about whether this is continuity or change, do you think the EPP is looking to continue what Juncker had done, or to change, deviate from that?
Absolutely. I think they're going to stick to their line. As Marie McGuinness said there, she said, we're a family. And the problem is they're shiny, articulate, middle class, wealthy, well-educated.
Yeah, but despite what's going on in
and they're out of touch with reality, because when I ask MEPs from the EPP group, what are you going to do to address a number of issues or address populism, they just criticise the populists, the others who are not convinced about the project, the EU project, as opposed to looking at themselves and asking themselves what they are doing differently. And my other question is, we just saw two very articulate ladies there interviewed by Darren McCaffrey in Helsinki. How come there's no women being put forward by the European People's Party as possible candidates that would head the European Commission?
To that point, I mean, I would put this to you, Maria, because you have a German and a Finnish man, and you are from Portugal. I mean, is this representative? It's not their fault where they're from, but is this representative of the Europe moving forward?
Well, we have now, in fact, leading men and leading women. And it's very important that the European parties, they work with these leading teams, with men and women. This should happen. But let me tell you that it's important, this discussion is taking place now, because in fact, and that I have a different opinion, it's very important that when citizens vote, they feel they can influence not only the composition of the European Parliament, but somehow the choice of who will be the next president of the European Commission.
Yeah, but if someone from Portugal, they look at someone like Manfred Weber, Alexander Stubb, will they feel connected to that?
Well, in fact, as I told you, these candidates represent the Europe of status quo. Those who think that we don't need to change how things are going. This is not at all my position. And I'm at the heart of the European decision here, and I see that EPP so far has been blocked the real solutions we need for. When it comes responding to climate change, moving to a different kind of cars, well, we need these. When it comes protecting people in new kind of jobs we are having in the digital world, where we really need to make sure that everybody has a contract and social protection. When it comes negotiating big trade deals, where we should also be able to protect our standards. In all these issues, the European Popular Party is not in favor of this, is really blocking the solutions. So that's why I think we are going to a big choice in Europe between those who want to have this Europe, those who want to change Europe, and if we don't go to a change in Europe, we'll have worst, which is those who want to make the European Union collapse.
Take a point. I'll give you 10 seconds.
Sure, just 10 seconds. I just wonder, but if you were walking down the street in, say, Lisbon, and you showed people a picture of Manfred Weber, they'd even know who he is. I doubt it.
Well,
no,
but
they wouldn't.
He will circulate now across Europe, and the same will happen with the other candidates. For instance, from the Socialists and Democrats, we'll have Frans Timmermans also circulating. He is more renowned, in fact, because he's the first Vice President of the European Commission. And I think it's important to have people with executive experience in European front.
All right. And nobody knows those two men yet, but if Alexander Stubb, he loves himself, he's obsessed with himself, and he is a bit like a Duracell bunny, so at least he would put his face out there and make sure by the end of his mandate people know at least his name.
All right, well then we'll find out tomorrow when the result is actually out, that vote happens. All right, to another story we are watching, the politics of food, specifically vegan food in Europe. The European Commission is considering whether food producers should be forced to label products as vegetarian or vegan. And it's not the first time this issue has found itself on the EU political menu. Take a look at any food label in the grocery store and you'll see. It's not always easy to recognize the ingredients. In fact, many vegans say they have to study them with hyper-awareness. So a citizens' initiative was launched, just the beginning of a long process which could be met with industry backlash. When you think of vegans, does the word terrorism come to mind? Probably not. But that's what some people in France claimed this summer after 15 butcher shops were splashed with fake blood. The owners wrote to the government asking for protection against so-called militant vegans. But it's not all anti-vegetarian across Europe. In the Netherlands, a real attempt at changing the meat-heavy culture. A government report recently urged Dutch citizens to adopt a plant-based diet. The reason? To cut greenhouse gases. It also wants you to see a lot less of these guys by reducing livestock production. Well, joining us for this panel to discuss it is Thomas Waits. He's an Austrian MEP with the Greens. All right, I'll start with you, Thomas. This issue, why is it important and why is it coming up now?
Well, there's more and more young people realizing what kind of agricultural system there is in place. They see the cruelty of animal transports, they see the cruelty in slaughterhouses, they see the mass breeding production, and they just don't want to eat that stuff anymore. They just don't want to support that system with their money anymore. So they turn vegetarian, they turn vegan, and I think that's very understandable.
But it's not. It's been going on for decades. I think the request has come in about 10 years ago, but it's only now. So why the delay? Let's say why is the EU only now starting to listen?
I absolutely have no idea why they're listening at all. I mean, I don't think that this is in any way should be a candidate for EU regulation. I'm sorry, but vegans can't read ingredients.
But it's important to know what's in your food. If you know,
this is a job for the market, right? There are a lot of people who are becoming vegetarian and vegan. They want to buy vegetarian and vegan food. Clever companies will write, "We are vegan," like on your video footage there, and then those people will go and buy. The idea that this has to be regulated is just bonkers.
I think citizens have a right to know what they buy. They have a right to obviously see what they buy. If you buy some sweets for your kids and then realize that they are made with pork gelatine or they are kind of covered with pork
read
fat,
the ingredients.
Yeah?
I mean, people don't need to have their hands held all the time. And that's the problem. It's this hand-holding.
It's actually the vegetarian lobby who've been pushing for this actually since 2008. They've been writing to the Commission asking them to define vegan and vegetarianism, and they were hoping that Brexit and the European elections wouldn't overtake this matter. And we've seen that it would, because this morning Margrethe Schinas, the spokesperson over in the European Commission, said, "Look, we will not be dealing with this issue. We will pass it on to post-2019 when the new Commission is put in place." So it's an issue actually that they do want to see addressed.
Consumers already have the power, and the power is in their wallet. You know, you reward the companies which do what they see as the right thing, and the problem's solved. If you don't like meat, don't throw blood on a butcher. Just don't buy meat.
But then that's the question. What is so wrong about regulating the labeling of products like these?
Exactly.
Well, what is so wrong about it? Because, well, for one thing, there would be the need to add an extra burden on people. I mean, the second thing is it adds to this cloying.
But where's the extra burden for people? It's a burden maybe for business that people obviously see whether something is vegetarian or not.
Do people need to have
vegan in wine gums, and you can't eat that if you're vegan?
Right,
beyond labeling, though, I want to bring this up.
It's not an EU role.
Because veganism, vegetarianism, and traditionally it's been linked to policies of the left or on Greens or no. Now it's becoming more mainstream. Is it being politicized? Is there a stigma attached to veganism and vegetarianism, which is why people get so emotional about it?
There is a stigma, because it's clear that the more vegan you are, the less of a sense of humour you have, because you subscribe to a fundamentally joyless existence.
You've got to reply to that.
Yeah, that's a completely ridiculous announcement. I mean, I'm not a vegan person at all. Yeah, I think I have a big sense of humour, but I know many of my friends that also have a big sense of humour. That has nothing to do with that at all. Every single person and citizen has the right to feed themselves the way they want to, and to buy the products they prefer, and they should be supported with a very clear labeling. What has the industry to hide?
Look, and it's not a health issue at the end of the day. If you have an allergy, for example, to something that's in your wine gum, you can get a reaction on your face. I've seen it happen. Friends of mine have had convulsions because they've been allergic to something in the food, and they haven't known because of the label.
It comes down to whether you want to take responsibility for your own choices or whether you want a government or an institution to take responsibility for you.
Yeah, but you can't put all the responsibility on citizens, yeah? We're not selling cars without brakes and then asking the citizens to decide whether they take a car with brake or without
precisely
a
my
brake.
point. Look at that.
I mean...
Look at that. Emotional discussion coming out.
As meat.
All right. Well, let's move on now to Germany. Well, lot more to talk about, because according to a recent New York Times article, this is again a story on stereotypes. A crisis of masculinity in the East could explain the rise of the far right. Let's take a look. When the Berlin Wall fell, thousands of people flooded to the West looking for work. 2/3 of them were women who never came back. As the West prospered, the East fell behind, and for many, hope turned into disappointment. When the far-right AfD began to rise, one group was at the center of its support, according to the New York Times, the angry Eastern man. It says men in Eastern Germany are twice as likely to vote for the party as women. And in Chemnitz, as far-right riots surged in August, men reportedly outnumbered women 10-8. Okay, angry men. Can we attribute the rise of the far-right to masculinity and the lack of women in that area?
I'd say yes. I mean, look, it's clear to anyone who's lived any sort of normal life that women tend to be more intelligent, more emotionally intelligent, and also just generally nicer people than men. I mean, I've been an angry man in my teenage years. I was a total scumbag. I mean, I didn't go on far-right marches and I didn't hit people. But, you know, I certainly was highly unreasonable.
But is that really the demographic of people voting for the far-right?
Well, just to back your point, Eurostat data does prove that women do perform very well, and as well as men, even better in school, but that's not reflected in the labour market. But as regards angry men voting for the far-right, not much to say on that, but it is, at the end of the day, all about inequality and all about having money or not in your pocket, and that's why we see such a big divide in the East and West.
Well, Marine Le Pen's a woman.
I think there's also an aspect of a questioned role model where there's not a real new version of a role model that has kind of walked the line through society. And I think many of these men don't find themselves in society as they used to do, and so they feel questioned in their role model, and that kind of also makes them react in a way also to vote for right-wing policies, just to kind of secure their culture against others.
And I mean, this isn't just a German thing either. I mean, this is happening across Europe. We see it with the Tommy Robinson stuff in Britain. I mean, but you know, you see it with people like
and politicians capitalize on that, don't they? When you know, towards genders, talking towards specific genders.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Look, there's a thing with masculinity where, you know what, I consider myself to be a relatively progressive man, relatively. And, you know, but there is still a feeling that, you know, as a man you must provide, as a man you must be the breadwinner and be in charge to a degree. But that now, in a sort of the globalization, the buffeting winds of globalization, there's a powerlessness which turns you basically into an angry... I can't say what I was going to say.
I mean, it's much easier to steer aggression within the male community than within the female community, because females.
Because I was going to ask on the flip side.
Very often look on the bigger picture, on the community, while men tend to go more for their ego.
And it depends, of course, on the issues as well. If you feel the issues, like if you look at women in Poland, a lot of them vote in favour of Law and Justice, the very conservative right-wing party, because they're doing a lot for them when they're on maternity leave. So it really depends on what's
There's an excellent
very interesting on that.
Sorry.
No, it is a very interesting discussion on demographics and who votes for what and why, of course. All right, coming up on Raw Politics, we have a lot more for you. UKIP leader Gerard Batten hits the reply all button in an email blasting British MEPs as snivelling quislings over Brexit. Plus, as both Democrats and
fan.
All right, well, those were Democrats and Republicans both claiming victory last night as the U.S. midterm election results rolled in. Europe has been watching this high-stakes poll much more closely than previous U.S. midterms. Alex Morgan in the Cuban Lyon has the latest for us. Alex?
Tessa, I think it's fair to ask how closely Americans are watching previous midterms. I mean, really, this was an exceptional midterm election, the number of people going to the polls. And the question we're asking, do Europeans care? I mean, do people care about what could be seen as a domestic affair in America? Yes, they do. And I can tell you why. Google says so. Let me show you. Here's the data from Google. They show that actually in the 24 hours leading up to Election Day, it was the United Kingdom after Canada, which is the country that Googled the most about the elections, asking questions, wanting information. America, the United States, was fourth. Now, also in their top 10 is Ireland as well. So Europe did care. Europe was watching. Europe was Googling, asking all sorts of questions. And, of course, we've been looking through all the real voices, people out there, what they've been saying. And of course, there's been a mix, as you'd expect in Europe in 2018, between people backing and supporting Trump and people who are obviously backing the Democrats. And let's just pull up what Vivian Hock had to say in Paris. He is an academic, he's a researcher, and he says, for him, Donald Trump cemented his grip on the Senate last night. He says this was a great victory, and he asks for more pleas, praising the president. And also, he wasn't the only one in France praising Donald Trump. Eric, he's also in Paris. He's a political activist. He sent us this short clip explaining why he was so excited about Trump's victory in the Senate, at least.
For many French people, Trump's victory in the Senate shows that a conservative policy can function and have the support of the population, especially after Kavanaugh nomination. Moreover, it's a big defeat for European media, which try to give a bad image of Donald Trump and of populism.
European media. So it's a slap down to European media trying to give a bad image of populism. That's what Eric has to say. Well, of course, Europe has many, many voices. And on the other side, people pointing out that, yes, the Senate was a Republican victory, but for them, the Congress went to progressives. Let's pull up what Jeanette had to say. She's a feminist activist, and for her, it was the election of so many progressive women. That was her standout from last night.
Representation in politics matters. The more diversity citizens see in their candidates, the better. These midterms show that progressive women are taking their rightful seat at the table. They will change the rules of the game, and they inspire women all over the world to do the same.
Inspiring women all over the world to do the same. Jeanette sending us that there from Berlin. I'm just going to end, if I might, on Daniel from Berlin. He works at a think tank, and for him, this is a positive political swing, not just for America, but for Europe too.
The majority of Democrats in the House of Representatives show that many people voted against discriminatory and disruptive policies in general. So this, in my opinion, is a huge message and a very important sign, and maybe even bright herald for our own elections next year in Europe in 2019. And I do hope that this is also a glimpse of a brighter future for a transatlantic friendship that has suffered immensely over the last years.
So there we go, Tessa. Just a flavour of some of the voices across Europe who are watching those midterms very, very closely.
Thank you for that, Alex and the CUBE team. And joining me here in the studio to take stock of what these elections mean for Europe, we have Maeve McMahon, who's still with us, our Brussels correspondent, independent MEP Marian Harkin, who's a member of the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with the US. And we also have Danish People's Party MEP Anders Vistisen, who is vice chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. All right, well, according to Google, as Alex said, Europe does care, looking up at the midterm elections. But is there going to be a real effect on Europe? I'll ask you, Marianne, or are we just obsessing about it and there's not going to be any real effect?
Well, I think to some extent we are obsessing about it because we feel to some extent it might reflect what's going on here. So I think in that context, and I was interested to see Ireland was in the top 10. I was watching it myself until very late. But I think because we have such a strong connection with the US, because they're such strong trading partners, we do care, and it does matter. And we're wondering, can we draw lessons from what happened in the US? Does that point to the future here in Europe?
Do you agree? I mean, are there lessons to be learned? Is that why we're watching this is it why Europe is watching this very closely?
I think for political geeks and people who are very interested in American politics, this might be somewhat more entertaining than European politics at times, or seems to be at least. I think it's a great as a spectacle. But if we're looking sort of purely at the foreign affairs relation that comes out of this, it's primarily something that is embedded within the powers of the presidency and the Senate. And that remains the same. So if I'm looking more on the content side of things, I don't see a real tangible change that we will feel in transatlantic relations from this election. But of course, it's interesting that the president will now struggle more with his domestic agenda when the House have went to the Democratic side.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting change indeed. But before we get to that, I'll bring up two quotes because two leading commissioners couldn't help but have a gloat at Trump on Twitter. Commission Vice President and the Socialist candidate to take over the commission, Frans Timmermans, he tweeted, inspired by voters in the U.S. who choose hope over fear, civility over rudeness, inclusion over racism, equality over discrimination. They stood up for their values, and so will we. Then we have Pierre Moscovici, the Commissioner for Economic and Financial Affairs, weighing in. He was tweeting also, the Democrats win the House of Representatives for the first time in 8 years, despite powerful Republican gerrymandering. Donald Trump is right. Tremendous success tonight. All right, when looking at those, I mean, is it appropriate to be commenting? They're gloating.
Well, Frans Timmermans is, of course, in campaign mode. He's put his hat in the ring to be the next Commission President on behalf of the Socialists, so he's going to tweet at every opportunity. And it's actually no secret either that most politicians that I speak to in this town, whether they're MEPs or whether they work in political parties or whether they're commissioners, they dislike Trump. They find him very disruptive. He is in favour of Brexit. He's anti-TTIP. He's all these things that most moderate politicians, if you like, here in Brussels are in favour of. And as well, Donald Trump's most trusted source on everything regarding the European Union is, of course, Nigel Farage, the former head of UKIP. So that's why you don't get many people here getting excited about the fact that Trump is not doing so well.
Well, I think there's a fear here because Trump would like to see a divided Europe, not a strong Europe. Because if Europe is divided, it's much easier for him to pick and choose who he wants to do deals with, etc. So a strong Europe is not a partner that he wants to deal with. And I think also people are concerned, you know, about the politics of fear. I mean, listen to what he was saying. It was about the migrants that, according to him, were criminals that would destroy society. And that went down well in some places. People are concerned here that that message will gain traction.
And I want to go back to your point where you say that you don't think there's going to be change, because now that the Democrats control the House of Representatives, Trump might just focus his attention on the Senate, where he has control, and that would mean foreign policy, and that would mean possibly trying to, you know, have bragging rights on foreign policy.
I think you should always be careful when you're bragging. These two representatives come from socialist parties that in both their countries have collapsed down to under 10%. So maybe they should be a little bit more careful. Trump is not that far down yet. But if we go back to the content side, yeah, of course, foreign affairs is often where presidents who are in deadlock back home or lame ducks back home have to turn their attention. So we know that there's going to come a push from the White House that has been announced several times, and it's been rumored quite a lot in foreign affairs circles on his initiative for Israel-Palestine peace. So that might be something that he could throw himself on his foreign affairs agenda.
And Europe will probably be on the cards as well. All right, of course, we'll be keeping an eye on the developments in the United States, as we always do. And now, at one point or another, though, we've probably all been involved in a reply all incident. Normally, they're annoying emails we don't really want or read, but every now and then a good one comes along. Let's take a look. It all started with UKIP MEP Gerard Batten. He received an email about extending the UK's transition period out of the EU. In a reply all, he called British MEPs a bunch of snivelling quislings who were desperate to keep their seats on the EU parliamentary gravy train. Labour MEP Seb Dance couldn't resist another reply all. He thanked Batten for demonstrating his true character through his reply. It reveals that for him, being an MEP is about collecting financial benefits and nothing more. And it didn't stop there. His name-calling would be a disgrace were it not simply a reflection of a desperately unimpressive man incapable of engaging in rational debate or reasonable argument. I mean, in many ways, that reply all is a dangerous button, isn't it?
Absolutely, and the real truth comes out. Now we know how people in this house really dislike each other. But yeah, we've all had these replies all. We know people don't really want to read them, but you just want to include everyone. But
it's almost passive-aggressive, actually, this kind of button. All right, after the break on Raw Politics, we will talk Brexit, and we'll tell you about a leaked memo on the UK's Brexit strategy. It has Downing Street scrambling. Don't go away. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now let's talk Brexit, because there's a lot of speculation that a deal is now close. In fact, an email leaked to HuffPost UK appears to reveal a timetable for how Theresa May will sell her Brexit deal to the country. Let's take a look. According to the leaked email, a moment of decisive progress will be announced this Thursday. That's tomorrow. How will it be treated by Downing Street? Well, the narrative is going to be measured success, but won't be all champagne corks popping, the memo says. Later in the month, the PM visits border communities and businesses in Northern Ireland and maybe also to Wales to visit agricultural and export businesses. Trying to get Varadkar to support, the email reads, and note the misspelling of the Taoiseach's name. As for global Britain, the memo speaks of lining up lots of former foreign secretaries to come out in support, and Mark Littlewood of the IEA. Note the rude remark about this think tank boss. As we reach the end of the month, the PM interview with Dimbleby. That's David Dimbleby, the veteran political journalist. And on the 27th of November, the moment of truth as the deal faces the House of Commons. Evening is the vote. Historic moment. Put your own interests aside, put the country's interests first, and back this deal, the memo reads. All right, well, with me to discuss this, I'm joined by Patrick O'Flynn, is a British MEP from UKIP and part of the EFDD group. And joining us again is Telegraph journalist James Crisp. And staying with us is Marianne Harkin, an independent MEP from Ireland. All right, I'll start with you, Patrick. Seeing the leaked memo, it's almost like it's preparing everyone for what is going to be announced, which is a deal that Theresa May wants everybody to accept.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of stage management. I think many voters and certainly many people inside politics have suspected this for a very long time, and she is going to try and use stage management to push through something that's not proper Brexit, that will be effectively purgatory for the United Kingdom, locked in this backstop with no ability to exercise sovereign powers and step out of the customs union and make its own way in the world. Completely unacceptable, and people will see through it.
I mean, stage management, is this what it is? I mean,
well, stage management, I mean, that's what politics is. Really, isn't it? You know, she has her point of view. She's going to try and sell it. She'll use her somewhat limited PR powers. I mean, she's not exactly Martin Luther King, is she? I mean, she's not a thrilling or particularly easy person to warm to, but, you know, she has stuck it out. She's going to do her best. I mean, look, this PR plan was already out of date. The idea that we're close to a deal, I'm not so sure. I think that there's still loads and loads to be done.
Well, Marion, from Ireland,
Well, she may not be Martin Luther King, but she's the woman in charge, and I will give her that. I agree. I don't think a deal is that close. I mean, the Irish Prime Minister, whose name they spelled incorrectly, but if that's the only mistake, we can live with it. He has said in Helsinki that they're thinking more in terms of December. So I don't think a deal is that close. I think there are some very significant contradictions that still need to be dealt with, and they have to be hammered out. I have not yet seen evidence that has been done. And while, of course, it's choreography, she has her perspective, she wants to sell it. That's what most politicians do. You can excuse all of that, you can understand all of that, but I don't think that the solid basis for it is still there.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, well, no, I was just going to say, of course, you know, most politicians do have choreography, except Gerard Batten, your leader, Patrick. He has no choreography at all. He just goes on the keyboard and calls people snivelling, quizzling.
Well, Gerard is known for his very direct language. That's true. But a lot of people back in Britain are extremely angry that a referendum, they were told, would be respected and implemented, that the respect for it has evaporated by MEPs and MPs from the establishment political parties. So I think a lot of people will say, yes, Gerard has used very strong language there, but it actually illustrates an intensity of feeling that definitely exists back in the UK.
I mean, I think the fact that Theresa May also made promises, you know, in her early Brexit speeches, which she hasn't been able to keep. She's made promises repeatedly, which she's gone back on. There's been a constant lack of honesty with the British public.
But it's almost like a plea in this leaked memo where she says, put aside your differences and basically just, you know, accept and be more open-minded to the deal.
Forget about this sort of you know, studded hard Brexit vision, which was in Manson.
I do want to bring something up because you tweeted something today. You've got to tell us about this.
Well,
another, clear Brexit is happening. A sign that Brexit is happening. I want to turn to that thing that you put online. What is it?
Yeah, well, this is a picture from 2015 of Guy Verhofstadt, the European Parliament's Brexit coordinator, with his SMEG union flag fridge. But now it has been, I'm told reliably, relegated down the corridor, out in the cold, in a chilling metaphor, perhaps, for Britain in transition, with a brand new EU SMEG flag, which I'm told he got at a healthy discount.
Maybe he just needed to change his fridge.
Well, I don't know. How many fridges does one MEP need?
I mean, I think Guy Verhofstadt is on a roll with his messaging, isn't he? He had that the truck with Viktor Orban, and now he has this on his fridge.
Well, he's in campaign mode.
He is.
Like
that's true.
A lot of politicians.
And I'm told his party's not doing so well in Belgium, perhaps.
Well, we've got to get the ALDE group to reply to that.
Well, I do think one should have respect for all flags. That's my bottom line, because I think this is the only way that this place can work.
All right. Well, let's move on to tonight's raw moment, because billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates has a new mission these days. He wants to reinvent toilet technology and bring affordable sanitation to the world. Yesterday, he spoke at a conference in China, and he brought a questionable prop on stage.
Well, good morning. I brought a little exhibit here. This is a container of human feces.
I mean, yes.
Two important questions. Did I hear people applauding the container of human feces? No. Or were they applauding Bill Gates?
And I think when you're the richest man in the world, you probably get applauded for everything.
Whose feces was it?
Oh, good question.
Anyway, it isn't called the raw moment without reason.
But he was trying to make a point. He made it. I mean, he got the headlines. He grabbed headlines, didn't he? With that.
He did, and at a serious level. Yeah, what he's doing is really important. But we're not interested in being serious right now, so...
No.
He was highlighting the importance of sanitation, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
And that is a major issue. And very important.
But you can't unsee that image. Anyway, thank you very much for watching us tonight on Raw Politics. We'd like to hear your views and tell us what you're talking about. I'm on Twitter at Tessa Ercilia, or you can follow us also at Euronews. Use the hashtag Raw Politics. Have a good evening and bye for now.